Hi, my name is Nathan from nathancope.com. So we're going to take a shot at choosing some components for our first computer. However, I'd like to take a quick moment and talk about pricing and the whole get what you pay for paradigm. We could certainly build an entire system using the cheapest components possible, but do we really want to? Do we want a cheap system that could potentially not work when we put it together, or should we spend a little bit of money and build a system that'll last a few years? If we're putting a computer together ourselves, we're probably going to have a bit of time, effort, and love invested into it. So why not make it something nice? Perhaps even nice enough to show off to our friends. Let's actually take a look at building a super cheap computer using newegg.com and see where we're at. We'll go through the components after we build one and decide if we have a decent computer or just a computer on the cheap that may or may not work. I've put together a shopping cart on newegg.com full of components that are at the bottom of the totem pole in price. We'll go through these components now so I can show you some reasons why it's a good idea to lift the bar a bit even when purchasing parts on a budget. So here we are on Newegg. This is a list of components I've compiled into a shopping cart, and we're going to go through them one by one so we can find the reasons why we may not want to purchase these. We'll start with the case here. This is a refurbished Diablotech case. It's regularly $50 and we have a $25 discount, bring it down to $25. That sounds great, especially because it comes with a power supply. But let's take a deeper look at this case. So the first thing I can see that is an issue here is it's refurbished. When you buy a refurbished case, what ends up happening usually is the power supply that's included with the case has a ton of dust, or it's dirty on the inside of the case because it's been used. So let's take a look at the case itself. And I will say that my main reason for not buying this case is that the inside, the metal, is not painted. One of the reasons why that's an issue is because, especially with a really cheap case, is that the metal can be very sharp, can be very thin and flimsy. It could cut you, it could cut the cables. It's just not a really sturdy encasing that can be used for all the components that you're going to be putting into it. So that's one reason why you wouldn't choose this case. Another reason is the fact that it comes with a 400 watt power supply. Getting a case for $25 with a 400 watt power supply, you have to think to yourself, well, they're factoring in the cost of the power supply into this price. So you're basically buying a $10 or $15 power supply. That is just, you're going to get what you pay for, which is going to be a garbage power supply. And you want your power supply to be pretty decent. You want your computer components to have a nice flow of power coming to them without any issues, without any fluctuations in the voltage, etc., etc. So that's another reason why I wouldn't go with this case. Another reason is I don't believe this case has USB 3 ports on it. So if you have a motherboard that you wanted to have the USB 3 ports come out the front, this case would not do it for you. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the reviews as well. Hey, look at that. This baby sliced my finger. So as I was talking about before, the metal is very thin, so we really don't want that to happen to you. Okay, let's see. Oh, look, dust in the fan for the power supply. Interesting. So I think we could stop there regarding this case. This is not a case that we would buy for a number of reasons. Let's move on to our next component, and that is our motherboard. Cheap motherboard. Regularly $35, save $5, now it's $30. Okay, so number one right off the bat that I don't like about this motherboard is the memory speed. For this day and age, DDR3 1600 is pretty slow. Let's see what's on the board here. Okay, so we have USB 3 ports. That's good. However, I do not see a USB 3 header, which is where you would plug the case USB 3 ports into. So if you had a case that had a USB 3 ports on it, you would not be able to use them. So that's an issue. Another issue I see here is we only have two SATA controller ports. So you could only have two devices maximum for drives in your machine. That's a no-brainer. I would probably skip this board because of that. Let's see what else we have here. Let's take a look at some of the reviews. See some issues people are having. Can't overclock. No SPDIF output, which is digital audio. Only two SATA ports. Looks like there's some issue with memory. You can only have a certain kind, even though the website says the opposite. All right, so I think that's enough for now for this motherboard. I don't think we're going to go with this motherboard, and I've shown you some reasons why. All right, so that's motherboard. Let's take a look at the next one, which is the processor. This is the type of processor that would go with that motherboard. It's an AM1 slot form factor that we would use. There's not much to say about a processor. What I can do is show you where this falls on the CPU benchmark that we talked about before. So let's go over here. I actually have it open already. So this is the high mid-range CPUs chart. This is not the chart that I have recommended to use. The high-end chart, which is the one I recommend to use, has a lot of processors on it. So even if you hit way down below down here, these are some fairly low performing CPUs. But this particular CPU we're looking at falls on the second page, which I don't really like. And if we were to take a look at some of the reviews are going to say things like, let's see, here we go, can't play 1080p video smoothly. That's a no-brainer. You know, YouTube is where you would see something like that, and it would be upsetting to have the option to play 1080p and then the frame rates crap out and everything looks horrible. Okay, so I think that's enough for this CPU. Let's move on. Memory. Not much to say about this, except that it only has 4 reviews. You know, there are some well-known brands that I like to go with. I don't really know this Team Elite brand. I like Crucial. I like Kingston. Again, it's fairly cheap. This is the cheapest of this type that I could find, but I don't like the number of reviews, to be honest. And the timing here, this isn't great for high performance systems, and you'll probably see some complaints about that in here. Yeah, complaints about the timings. This memory would probably work great, but I would skip it based on the timings and the fact that it's such a low, well, that's really based on the motherboard, the low speed and the timings. Okay, so let's kill that. And yes, hard drives. Oh boy. So number one, this is refurbished, which only gives you a 90-day warranty. That's real bad. It's a really cheap drive, $16, and you got yourself 160 gigs of storage. But your drive is your data. That's where it's the most important part of your system when it comes to your files. And you want it to be a really solid piece of hardware that you have some faith in, where you're not thinking, is this drive going to crap out again because it's refurbished. But beyond that, I don't like the 2 megabytes cache. Nowadays, you see 8 meg, 16, even 64 for spindle drives. 160 gig is really, really, really small. You know, you could get an SSD drive of the same size. You know, it'll probably be about 150 bucks, 100 to 150 bucks for that size. Actually, it might even be less than that now. But you'll have a solid, high performing device where you can store your data rather than this this guy, which you just don't know if it's going to survive. Okay, so that's the hard drive, and here's the mouse and keyboard. Now you'll notice that this is actually a pretty decent deal. 15 bucks, 5 eggs, 270 reviews. I'm actually going to use this in our first build. So, you know, lowest cost isn't necessarily a bad thing if you look at everything else. And I consider keyboards and mice to be sort of throwaway devices. They always get all dirty and mucked up, and a lot of times they get so filled with stuff you just have to replace them. So I like to keep the price on these low anyway. Okay, so let's see. The last thing here is a DVD burner. A lot of people who build systems don't even put burners in their systems anymore for a number of reasons. There's everything is digital and downloaded nowadays. We have the USB thumb drives, and for people that do install these into their systems, it's really just for emergencies or if they have data stored on DVDs or CDs that they just don't feel like converting, they would install one of these. This is a refurbished drive. I do like the Asus brand, but it is refurbished, does not have any reviews. That's a problem. Like I said, it's one of those things where this drive is probably just going to be used for pulling in data that you might have on CDs or DVDs. I don't know. You know, it's really up to you. I will say that really cheap low end burners tend to crap out sooner than others. I don't really know why. It's happened to me many times. So if you're looking for your drive to be used fairly often, I would try and raise the bar a little bit and get something nice. Okay, so that's it. That's our list of components. I hope that how I sort of discussed things and how my thought process for purchasing components was helpful. And I want to thank you for watching this video as well as the rest of the video in the series, and we will move on.